was watching 37 delivery trucks sit motionless in our loading bay when my phone buzzed with a call I'd been expecting for 6 months. The same trucks that should have been moving $2.8 million worth of auto parts to dealerships across the Midwest were now just expensive paperweights, and Tyler Brennan finally understood why. My name is Jessica Coleman, and for 8 years I'd been the systems manager at Brennan Auto Supply, a family-owned warehouse operation that distributed car parts to 340 dealerships in 12 states. When I say systems manager, I don't mean I fixed computers when they crashed. I mean I built and maintained the entire digital backbone that made this company run. Every barcode scanner, every inventory database, every automated sorting system, every GPS tracking module, I designed it, programmed it, and kept it running 24 hours a day. Without my systems, Brennan Auto Supply was just a big building full of confused workers holding clipboards. Tyler Brennan, the owner's nephew and our newly appointed operations director, had learned this lesson the hard way. 6 months ago, he'd laughed when I asked for a raise. Today, he was begging me to save his career. The thing about running complex warehouse operations is that everything connects to everything else. You can't just swap out one piece and expect the puzzle to stay together. But Tyler had never understood that, even after I'd tried explaining it to him dozens of times over the past 2 years. Brennan Auto Supply wasn't some small family business anymore. We processed 15,000 orders daily, managed inventory for 89,000 different parts, and coordinated deliveries to dealerships from Michigan to Texas. The margin for error was basically zero. When a Toyota dealership in Chicago needed brake pads for a customer's car, they expected those parts delivered within 18 hours, not next week. I'd built our system from scratch when I started here 8 years ago. Back then, we were doing maybe 3,000 orders a day with 20 employees and a handful of delivery trucks. Old man Brennan had hired me straight out of technical college because I was cheap and eager. What he got was someone who turned his struggling parts warehouse into a regional powerhouse. The system I created wasn't just software. It was a complete integration of inventory tracking, predictive ordering, route optimization, and real-time coordination between our warehouse floor and delivery fleet. Every successful delivery, every satisfied customer, every dollar of profit flowed through systems that existed because I'd spent 8 years learning how this business actually worked. Tyler never appreciated any of that. To him, I was just the computer girl who made things beep and flash on screens. He joined the company 18 months ago after graduating from business school, and his uncle Frank had immediately started grooming him to take over operations. That meant Tyler spent most of his time in meetings talking about efficiency metrics and cost optimization while I kept the actual business running. The problem started when Tyler decided we needed to modernize our approach. He'd read about artificial intelligence and cloud computing in some business magazine and figured our systems were outdated because they weren't buzzword compliant. Never mind that our systems worked perfectly and had zero downtime for the past 3 years. Every month, Tyler would call me into his office with some new idea about upgrading or outsourcing or streamlining our technology. I'd patiently explain why his suggestions wouldn't work with our specific needs, and he'd nod along like he understood. Then he'd ignore everything I said and keep pushing for changes that would break everything we'd built. The breaking point came 6 months ago during our annual budget meetings. I'd been making the same salary for 3 years while taking on more responsibilities every quarter. Our revenue had grown 340% since I started, but my paycheck had barely kept up with inflation. I finally decided to ask for what I was worth. I'd spent weeks preparing for that conversation. I put together a detailed presentation showing how my systems had increased our processing capacity, reduced errors, and improved customer satisfaction. I had charts showing our cost savings, graphs demonstrating our competitive advantages, and testimonials from dealership customers praising our reliability. The numbers were clear. My automated systems had eliminated the need for 12 full-time data entry clerks, saving the company $480,000 annually in wages and benefits. My route optimization software had reduced fuel costs by 23%, saving another $180,000 per year. My predictive inventory system had cut our storage costs by 15% while improving order fulfillment rates to 99.7%. I was making $62,000 a year for work that had directly generated over $2 million in annual savings and revenue increases. In my presentation, I asked for a raise to $85,000, still below market rate for someone with my responsibilities, but a fair recognition of my actual contribution to the company. Tyler listened to my entire presentation without interrupting. He asked a few questions about the numbers, nodded thoughtfully, and told me he'd discuss it with his Uncle Frank and get back to me within a week. I walked out feeling optimistic. The data was overwhelming. How could they say no? Tyler called me back into his office 3 days later. This time, Frank Brennan was there too, sitting behind the desk like he was conducting a performance review. Frank had always been fair with me, but I could see he was letting Tyler handle this conversation. "Jessica, we've reviewed your request," Tyler said, not bothering with small talk. "And frankly, we're a little surprised. Your salary is already competitive for your position, and we've provided you with excellent job security and benefits." I started to respond with the data from my presentation, but Tyler held up his hand. "Look, anyone can run reports and make fancy charts. What you do isn't really that complex. Most of these systems practically run themselves once they're set up. We appreciate your contributions, but asking for a 37% raise is unrealistic for someone in a support role." A support role. 8 years of building this company's entire technological infrastructure, and he called it a support role. Frank cleared his throat. "Jessica, we value your work, but Tyler's right. The systems are stable now. We don't need the same level of intensity that we needed when you were first building everything. Maybe it's time to think about work-life balance instead of just money." Tyler leaned forward with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Besides, it's not like you could take these systems with you if you left. Everything you've built belongs to Brennan Auto Supply. You'd be starting over somewhere else." That comment about starting over somewhere else was the moment I realized Tyler had fundamentally misunderstood our entire relationship. He thought the systems owned me, when actually I owned the systems. Not legally, he was right about that. But practically, functionally, realistically. You see, complex systems aren't just code and databases. They're living things that need constant attention, adjustment, and institutional knowledge to keep running. I hadn't just built software. I'd built solutions to hundreds of specific problems that occurred in our specific business environment. When the barcode scanners started misreading labels from our supplier in Ohio because their printer ran slightly hot and the ink bled, I'd written custom error-checking routines. When our delivery drivers in Texas kept missing addresses because the GPS coordinates in our database didn't match the street layouts in new subdivisions, I'd created a manual override system with local delivery notes. Every exception, every workaround, every custom solution existed in my head. The documentation was minimal because I'd never needed to train anyone else. Why would I? I was the person who fixed everything. Tyler saw stable systems and thought that meant they were simple. What he didn't understand was that they were stable because I was constantly making tiny adjustments, catching problems before they became disasters, and adapting to changes in our business environment. As I sat there listening to him explain why I wasn't worth $85,000 a year, I realized something important. I didn't need to prove my value to Tyler Brennan. The systems would do that for me. I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just nodded and said I understood their position. Tyler looked relieved, like he'd been expecting some kind of dramatic confrontation. Frank seemed satisfied that the awkward conversation was over. Neither of them noticed that I hadn't actually agreed to anything. That afternoon, I started quietly documenting everything. Not for them, for me. I created detailed records of every system, every integration point, every custom solution I'd built over 8 years. I backed up my personal development tools, my code libraries, and my testing environments to encrypted drives that belonged to me. I also started paying attention to the job market in ways I hadn't for years. 3 companies in our region were expanding their distribution operations. 2 logistics firms were actively recruiting experienced systems engineers. And there was a consulting opportunity with a company that helped small businesses upgrade their warehouse management systems. The consulting job was interesting. They specialized in taking family-owned distribution companies and implementing the kind of integrated systems I'd been building at Brennan. The pay was $95,000 base plus project bonuses, with the possibility of equity participation for the right candidate. They were particularly interested in people with hands-on experience at growing companies. I didn't apply immediately. First, I wanted to see how long it would take for Tyler to realize what he'd actually said no to. 2 weeks after the salary meeting, Tyler started his first major initiative as operations director. He'd hired a consulting firm to conduct an efficiency audit of our warehouse operations. These consultants were going to identify redundancies, streamline processes, and modernize our technology infrastructure. The consulting firm was called Modern Business Solutions, and their team leader was a sharp-dressed guy named Warren who kept talking about digital transformation and optimized workflows. Warren had an MBA from Northwestern and absolutely no experience with warehouse operations or inventory management. Tyler was thrilled. Here was someone who spoke his language, someone who understood the importance of leveraging synergies and maximizing operational effectiveness. Warren presented a preliminary report after just 1 week of observation, and Tyler scheduled an all-hands meeting to share the exciting findings. According to Warren, our systems were outdated and overcomplicated. We were using too many separate applications when we should be using an integrated enterprise resource planning system. Our custom solutions were inefficient compared to industry-standard software packages. Most importantly, we were spending too much money on specialized technical support when we could outsource our IT needs to a managed services provider. The presentation included a timeline for implementing these improvements over the next 6 months. Phase 1 would involve migrating our inventory data to a new cloud-based system. Phase 2 would replace our custom ordering and fulfillment applications with industry-standard software. Phase 3 would transition our technical support to an external vendor, eliminating the need for dedicated on-site systems management. Tyler asked if I had any questions about the modernization plan. I asked one, who's going to handle the transition period when we're running 2 different systems simultaneously? Warren answered before Tyler could respond. That's the beauty of modern cloud solutions. The migration is automated. Minimal disruption, maximum efficiency. I knew right then that Tyler had made his decision. The consulting firm's recommendations weren't just about improving our systems, they were about proving that he'd been right all along. My custom solutions were unnecessary. My specialized knowledge was replaceable. My request for a raise was completely unreasonable. Over the next month, Tyler started making changes. He subscribed to a new inventory management platform without consulting me about integration requirements. He hired Modern Business Solutions to begin migrating our product database, again without discussing the technical implications. He even started interviewing managed services companies to take over our IT support. Every change created small problems that I had to fix. The new inventory platform couldn't handle our custom part numbering system, so I had to write conversion routines. The database migration corrupted some of our supplier information, so I had to restore from backups and rebuild the connections. The managed services company kept asking me questions about our network configuration because their documentation was incomplete. Tyler interpreted my problem-solving as resistance to change. In his weekly status meetings, he started making comments about embracing new approaches and not being stuck in old ways of thinking. He never said my name directly, but everyone knew who he was talking about. The final straw came during a meeting about the managed services transition. Tyler announced that Modern Business Solutions had recommended eliminating the systems manager position entirely. According to their analysis, all of our technical needs could be handled remotely by their support team for 60% of what we were currently spending on in-house expertise. Tyler looked directly at me. Jessica, we'll obviously provide you with a generous severance package and excellent references. But it's time for Brennan Auto Supply to join the 21st century. I didn't quit that day. I didn't storm out or make angry speeches. I just asked Tyler when he wanted me to begin the knowledge transfer process with Modern Business Solutions. He said they'd handle the technical details, but he appreciated my willingness to cooperate during the transition. What Tyler didn't know was that I'd already accepted the consulting position with the warehouse systems company. My start date was scheduled for 6 weeks later, which gave me time to finish some personal projects and take a vacation before starting the new job. I also didn't tell Tyler that Modern Business Solutions had already contacted me directly. Warren had called my personal phone asking if I'd be interested in consulting with them on the Brennan transition. Apparently, their automated migration tools weren't working as smoothly as expected, and they needed someone with specific knowledge of our systems to help troubleshoot the problems. I politely declined. I explained that I'd be starting a new position and wouldn't be available for consulting work. Warren seemed surprised. He'd assumed I'd be desperate for income after losing my job. He offered to double their usual consulting rate if I'd agree to help them for just a few weeks. When I said no again, Warren's tone changed. He started asking detailed questions about our system's architecture, our database structure, and our integration protocols. I could tell he was trying to extract information that would help his team complete the migration without my assistance. I answered his questions politely but vaguely. Technical discussions required context, I explained. Without being able to examine the systems directly, it was hard to provide specific guidance. Warren would need to work with Tyler to arrange appropriate access and documentation. My last day at Brennan Auto Supply was a Tuesday. Tyler had scheduled a brief transition meeting where I was supposed to provide Modern Business Solutions with passwords, system documentation, and an overview of our technical infrastructure. The meeting lasted about 20 minutes. I handed over my access credentials, my company laptop, and my security badge. I provided Warren with copies of the technical documentation I'd created over the years, about 40 pages of network diagrams, database schemas, and system configuration notes. Tyler seemed satisfied that everything was being handled professionally. What Tyler didn't realize was that 40 pages of documentation couldn't possibly capture 8 years of institutional knowledge. The documents I provided were accurate but incomplete. They showed what our systems did, but not how they handled exceptions. They included standard configurations, but not the custom modifications I'd made to solve specific problems. More importantly, the documentation didn't include the maintenance routines I ran manually. Things like database optimization scripts that I executed monthly, inventory reconciliation procedures that I performed weekly, and system health checks that I did daily. These weren't automated because they required judgment calls based on current business conditions. I shook hands with Tyler and wished him good luck with the modernization project. I told Warren that I was confident his team would be able to handle any technical challenges that arose. I cleaned out my desk, loaded my personal belongings into my car, and drove home. That evening, I turned off my work phone for the first time in 8 years. For the next 2 weeks, I was going to be unreachable. No emails, no emergency calls, no requests for quick fixes or urgent consultations. Tyler had wanted me to join the 21st century. Well, in the 21st century, former employees didn't provide free technical support. The first call came on Thursday morning, 2 days after my last day. Tyler left a voicemail asking if I could clarify something about our inventory database structure. Apparently, Modern Business Solutions was having trouble understanding how our product categories were organized, and Warren thought a quick conversation might help clear things up. I didn't call back. Friday brought 3 more calls. The new inventory management platform wasn't syncing properly with our ordering system. Some of the product data hadn't migrated correctly, and Warren's team needed help identifying the source of the corruption. Tyler sounded slightly less confident than usual, but still professional and polite. I didn't call back. The following Monday, Tyler called 6 times. The managed services company had accidentally disabled our automated reordering system while trying to update the software. Inventory levels were dropping faster than expected, but the system wasn't generating purchase orders for critical parts. Several dealerships were complaining about missing shipments. I didn't call back. By Wednesday, Tyler's voicemails were no longer polite requests for consultation. They were urgent pleas for emergency assistance. The inventory discrepancies had cascaded into order fulfillment problems. Dealers were calling to complain about late deliveries and incorrect shipments. 3 major customers were threatening to find alternative suppliers if their next orders weren't processed correctly. I was sitting on my back porch, enjoying my morning coffee and reading the news, when my personal phone rang. The caller ID showed Tyler's direct office line. I answered on the 4th ring. "Jessica, thank God," Tyler said, his voice tight with stress. "We need your help. Something's wrong with the inventory system, and Warren's team can't figure out what's happening." "I'm sorry to hear you're having problems," I replied calmly. "Have you tried contacting the software vendor's technical support?" "We tried that. They said the software is working correctly. The problem is with our data migration. Warren thinks some of the custom modifications you made are interfering with the new system." I sipped my coffee and watched a cardinal land on my bird feeder. "That's unfortunate. What did Warren recommend?" "He wants to start over with a clean database, but that would mean losing all of our historical inventory data and supplier information." "Jessica, we can't do that. We need those records to run the business." "I understand your concern," I said, "but I'm not sure how I can help. I don't work at Brennan Auto Supply anymore, remember?" Long pause. "Look, I know we didn't part on the best terms. But this is an emergency. We'll pay you consulting rates to help us fix this problem. Whatever your hourly rate is, we'll match it." "Tyler, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not available for consulting work. I start a new job next week, and I'm using this time to prepare for that transition." "Jessica, please. We'll pay double your old salary. Just for a few days while we get this sorted out." I finished my coffee and stood up to go inside. "Tyler, 6 months ago I asked for a raise to $85,000 because I thought my work was worth that much. You laughed and told me I was replaceable. I guess we're both finding out what I was actually worth." Tyler called back an hour later. This time, Frank Brennan was on the line too. "Jessica, this is Frank. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Tyler tells me you're not willing to help us with some technical problems. That doesn't sound like the Jessica Coleman I've known for 8 years." "Hello, Mr. Brennan," I said. "There's no misunderstanding. Tyler made it clear that my services weren't valuable enough to justify a market rate salary. I accepted that evaluation and found employment elsewhere." "Jessica, be reasonable. We're talking about a temporary consulting arrangement, not a permanent position. Tyler's authorized to pay you $150 an hour to help us resolve these system issues. That's more than double what we were paying you before." I did the math quickly. $150 an hour, full-time, would work out to about $312,000 annually. 6 months ago, they'd refused to pay me $85,000. "Mr. Brennan, I'm flattered by the offer, but I'm not available. These system problems aren't my responsibility anymore. You hired Modern Business Solutions to handle your technical needs. I'm sure Warren and his team will figure it out." Frank's voice got harder. "Jessica, I'm going to be direct. We've got $200,000 worth of orders that can't be processed because the inventory system isn't working properly. Our biggest customers are threatening to leave. If this continues for another week, we could lose 30% of our business." "That sounds like a serious problem," I agreed. "You should definitely get it fixed as quickly as possible." "Damn it, Jessica, stop playing games. What do you want?" I walked to my window and looked out at my neighbor's garden. "Mr. Brennan, I don't want anything from you. 6 months ago, I wanted recognition for my contributions and fair compensation for my work. Tyler explained that those things weren't available, so I found them somewhere else." The calls stopped for 2 days. I figured Tyler and Frank were working with Modern Business Solutions to solve their problems. Maybe Warren had brought in additional consultants, or maybe they'd decided to rebuild their systems from scratch. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. On Friday afternoon, my doorbell rang. Tyler was standing on my front porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Jessica, we need to talk." I invited him in and offered him a cup of coffee. He accepted gratefully and sat down at my kitchen table like a man who'd run out of options. The inventory system crashed completely yesterday, he said without preamble. Warren's team tried to restore it from backups, but something went wrong. We lost 3 days of order data, and now we can't tell which shipments have gone out and which ones are still pending. I nodded sympathetically. That sounds challenging. It gets worse. The managed services company can't access our network remotely because some security protocol isn't working correctly. They're saying it might be related to custom firewall rules that aren't documented in the materials you provided. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat down across from him. What does Warren recommend? Warren quit. His company terminated our contract yesterday. They said our systems are too customized for their standard support procedures. They're refunding their fee, but they can't help us fix the problems they created. Tyler looked up at me with desperate eyes. Jessica, I screwed up. I thought your systems were simple because they worked so well. I didn't understand that they worked well because you'd spent 8 years making them bulletproof. I was wrong about everything, and now I'm going to lose the company because of my mistakes. I studied Tyler's face for a long moment. He looked genuinely broken, not just frustrated or embarrassed. This wasn't the arrogant business school graduate who'd laughed at my raise request 6 months ago. This was someone who'd learned a very expensive lesson about the difference between complicated and complex. Tyler, what exactly are you asking me to do? Come back. Permanently. I'll give you the raise you asked for, plus a 20% bonus for the emergency work. I'll also give you equity in the company, 2% ownership stake that vests over 5 years. You'll report directly to Frank, not to me. You'll have complete authority over all technical decisions. I raised an eyebrow. That's a generous offer. What about your modernization plans? Cancelled. We're keeping your systems exactly the way they were. No more consultants, no more upgrades, no more interference from people who don't understand how this business actually works. Tyler leaned forward. Jessica, I'll be honest with you. Frank is furious. He's talking about firing me and bringing in an outside manager to clean up this mess. The only thing that might save my job is if I can convince you to come back and fix what I broke. I finished my coffee and set down the cup. Tyler, I appreciate your honesty, but I've already accepted another position. I start Monday morning, and I've signed a contract. Even if I wanted to help you, which I'm not sure I do, I couldn't break my commitment to my new employer. Tyler's face went pale. There has to be something. Some way to fix this. I can't let my uncle lose his business because I was too arrogant to listen to the one person who actually knew what she was talking about. I stood up and walked to the window. Tyler, can I ask you something? When you refused my raise request, what did you think would happen? Did you really believe I'd just accept being undervalued forever? Tyler was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I thought you needed us more than we needed you. You'd been here for 8 years. All of your experience was tied up in our systems. I figured you'd complain for a while, then get back to work because you didn't have any other options. And now I understand that we needed you more than you needed us. A lot more. Jessica, without your systems, we're not a modern distribution company. We're just a warehouse full of people trying to figure out which parts go where. I turned back to face him. Tyler, I'm going to tell you something important. The systems weren't what made me valuable. Anyone can learn software and databases. What made me valuable was understanding your business well enough to build systems that solved your actual problems. Tyler nodded miserably. When you brought in Warren and his team, you hired people who knew technology but didn't understand auto parts distribution. They tried to force your business into their standard solutions instead of building solutions that fit your business. That's why everything fell apart. So what do I do now? I sat back down at the table. Tyler, you're asking the wrong question. It's not what you should do. It's what you should have done 6 months ago when you still had options. Tyler's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and winced. That's Frank. I'm supposed to be at the office in an hour for a meeting with our biggest customer. They're threatening to cancel a $800,000 annual contract because we can't guarantee delivery schedules. You should probably take that meeting seriously. How can I? I can't even tell them when their orders will ship because our inventory system doesn't work. After Tyler left, I called my new employer. The consulting company had been very understanding when I'd explained my situation during the interview process. They knew I was leaving Brennan under difficult circumstances, and they were impressed that I'd maintained my professionalism throughout the transition. I spoke with the company president, a woman named Carol who'd built her business by helping small companies solve complex operational problems. I explained what was happening at Brennan Auto Supply and asked if there might be any flexibility in my start date. Jessica, this is exactly the kind of situation we specialize in, Carol said. Instead of starting as a staff consultant, what if we structured this as your first client engagement? You'd be the lead consultant on the Brennan project, with full support from our technical team. The arrangement she proposed was elegant. I'd work as an independent contractor for the first 6 months, billing my time to Brennan through the consulting company. If everything worked out well, I'd transition to a permanent position with equity participation. If not, I'd have the freedom to pursue other opportunities. More importantly, the billing rate for emergency consulting was $200 per hour, with a minimum commitment of 40 hours per week. That worked out to $416,000 annually, nearly 7 times what Tyler had refused to pay me 6 months ago. I called Frank Brennan directly. Mr. Brennan, I understand you're having some technical difficulties. I'm not able to return as an employee, but I might be able to help you as an external consultant. Jessica, thank God. What do you need from us? I'll need complete authority over all technical decisions, no interference from Tyler or any other management personnel, and a commitment that you won't make any changes to the systems without my explicit approval. Done. What else? My consulting rate is $200 per hour, billed through my new employer. Minimum 40 hours per week until your systems are stable. Probably 6 months of work, maybe more depending on how much damage has been done. Long pause. Jessica, that's a lot of money. Yes, sir, it is. It's also what emergency technical consulting costs when your systems have been compromised and your business is at risk. I started work at Brennan Auto Supply the following Monday, not as Jessica Coleman, the undervalued systems manager, but as Jessica Coleman, senior technical consultant billing $200 per hour to fix problems I could have prevented for $85,000 per year. The damage was worse than I'd expected. Warren's team hadn't just failed to migrate the systems properly, they'd corrupted core data structures and disabled critical maintenance routines. The inventory database was missing about 15% of our part numbers. The ordering system was generating duplicate purchase orders. The delivery tracking system couldn't communicate with the warehouse management software. It wasn't malicious sabotage. It was the inevitable result of people who understood technology but not business trying to fix problems they didn't fully comprehend. Warren's team had treated our systems like generic software instead of specialized solutions built around 8 years of operational experience. The fix required rebuilding everything from archived backups, then carefully integrating 3 months of business data that had been processed through incompatible systems. It was detective work as much as programming, figuring out which transactions were legitimate, which were duplicates, and which were corrupted. Tyler stayed out of my way completely. Frank had apparently made it clear that any interference with my work would result in immediate termination. Tyler spent his time handling customer complaints and trying to rebuild relationships with dealers who'd lost confidence in our reliability. The work was actually enjoyable. I had unlimited budget for equipment and software. I could implement solutions the right way instead of working around budget constraints. And I was getting paid handsomely for expertise that 6 months earlier had been considered overpriced. 3 weeks into the consulting project, I had the core system stable enough to resume normal operations. Orders were processing correctly, inventory levels were accurate, and deliveries were back on schedule. Our major customers were satisfied, and the immediate crisis was over. But I wasn't finished. Frank had asked me to conduct a complete review of our technical infrastructure and recommend improvements to prevent future problems. This was the kind of strategic work I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was fighting daily fires. My recommendations were extensive. We needed redundant systems for critical processes, automated monitoring for system health, and comprehensive documentation for all custom solutions. We needed backup procedures that could be executed by non-technical staff, and we needed service agreements with vendors who actually understood our business requirements. Most importantly, we needed to acknowledge that technology wasn't just a support function. It was the core of our competitive advantage. Companies that understood this invested appropriately in their technical infrastructure. Companies that didn't found themselves paying emergency consulting rates to fix problems that should never have occurred. Frank approved all of my recommendations without question. The total cost was about $180,000 in new equipment and software, plus my ongoing consulting fees. It was expensive, but not compared to the cost of losing major customers or rebuilding the entire business after a system failure. Tyler attended the presentation but didn't ask any questions. He'd learned to listen when technical experts were talking. 4 months into the project, Frank asked me to consider staying permanently. Brennan Auto Supply was performing better than ever. Revenue was up 23% compared to the previous year, and customer satisfaction scores were at all-time highs. The technical infrastructure I'd rebuilt was more robust and reliable than our original systems. "Jessica, I'll be direct," Frank said during our meeting. "Tyler's learned his lesson, but he's not ready to manage technical operations. I need someone who understands both the business and the technology. I'm offering you the position of Chief Information Officer, reporting directly to me." The offer was generous. $145,000 base salary, plus performance bonuses tied to company revenue growth. 5% equity stake in the company, vesting over 3 years. Complete autonomy over technical decisions and budget authority for all system-related expenses. It was everything I'd wanted 6 months ago, plus recognition and authority I'd never expected. But I'd also learned something important during my time as a consultant. I enjoyed solving complex problems for different companies more than maintaining systems for one company. "Frank, I'm honored by the offer. But I think I found my calling as a consultant. I like helping companies solve problems they can't handle internally. And honestly, the work is more interesting when every project is different." Frank looked disappointed but not surprised. "What about Brennan? We still need ongoing technical support. I'd be happy to continue as your primary technical consultant. Reduced rate for routine maintenance, full rate for emergency work. That gives you access to my expertise without the overhead of a full-time CIO." We shook hands on an arrangement that worked for everyone. Brennan got reliable technical support from someone who understood their business. I got steady income from ongoing consulting plus the freedom to take on additional clients. Tyler and I had our final conversation 2 weeks before I transitioned to part-time consulting. He'd asked to meet privately, and I could tell he had something important to say. "Jessica, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the half-hearted excuses I gave you before." I waited for him to continue. 6 months ago, I thought I understood business because I had an MBA. I thought technology was just tools that anyone could use. I thought your value to the company was the systems you'd built, not the knowledge you'd accumulated. Tyler looked out the window at the loading dock where trucks were being loaded efficiently for the first time in months.